Welcome to the Sykes Company PA video blog.
Ollin, what questions should I be asking if I'm looking into buying a pharmacy?
Good morning, Virginia. The questions with respect to what needs to be asked when you're buying a pharmacy are pretty extensive. I get calls literally daily on this particular issue. And of course, the first comment that I make to potential parties, pharmacists that are calling is, number one, have you been to the NCPA Ownership Workshop, which is a 3-day intensive on-site training course that's given across the country 3 times a year and sponsored by the NCPA. And that's the first place that someone needs to start, because a lot of the questions that are being asked of me on these calls are answered in this intensive 3-day session, along with the experts that not only can answer these questions, but provide other help and assistance if need be. But in short, when someone is looking to buy a pharmacy, what has to be done is something called due diligence. And due diligence is digging down on the accounting and the tax information and the script information to make sure you understand completely all aspects of that pharmacy. Now, in many cases, a potential seller or a seller's representative will provide tax returns or copies of printed financial statements, which in my view is relatively useless. Yes, useless. And the reason they're useless is because it's what's behind those numbers that are so critical. So in our instant case, what we do is we request a full backup version of say, QuickBooks, because most pharmacies are using QuickBooks in their operation. And we get that full backup version of QuickBooks, as well as the tax returns that have been filed, as well as the spending records for the last 3 or 4 years, depending on how long the pharmacy has been in business. And we take a deep dive into that information, and we learn volumes. We see exactly what they've done correctly, what they've done incorrectly, what tax issues they may or may not have, what accounting issues they may or may not have, and we're able to ask a lot of questions from that give us great insights into the status of that pharmacy and its position currently, and maybe why someone is trying to sell a particular pharmacy. So in short, without doing that due diligence on that deep dive into the accounting and tax information, and trying to just use what the seller is providing to you, is what I believe is critical to making and taking that next step on your analysis.
Excellent. And are there any red flags that we need to be aware of if they're not willing to provide information or anything they don't have?
Oh, absolutely. In a lot of cases, and I tell the prospective buyers that the number one thing we're going to run into is the unwillingness of pharmacists not to share bits and pieces or some, if not all, of the information that we ask for, because they come back and say, well, I gave you financial statements and I gave you tax returns. Well, how do we know it makes up those numbers? How do we know the tax returns they've given us are actually the ones we filed with the IRS? Yes, people do commit fraud in providing any kind of information they want at any time to meet their particular needs from time to time, unfortunately. But, I mean, those are the kind of red flags. And if there's not complete transparency between the potential buyer and the seller with respect to providing information in a free-flowing basis, and sometimes a non-disclosure agreement is required to be signed, and we typically don't have any issues with doing that. But there should be a free-flowing of information between all parties involved so that the outside advisors can take that deep dive. And sometimes that obviously involves working with the outside healthcare legal specialists to assist in that process once we get to the point of wanting to make potentially a non-binding offer to the potential seller, which should be done in writing and should be done by a qualified expert that can handle those kinds of things.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel.